Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, back to talk about two particular young NBA players starting to show superstar potential. We're going to talk about Ben Simmons and Kristaps Porzingis. Those two are going to lead into an interesting conversation about Luka Doncic, as well as some of the other kind of combo-y forwards that are going to be in this NBA draft coming up, like your Michael Porters, your Miles Bridgeses, your Kevin Knoxes, your guys like that who kind of fit the modern archetype of the small ball four. Some of them aren't that small. A lot of them are more just stretch fours, playmaking fours, who are going to allow teams to play big while still retaining the spacing and everything that you're looking for. Cole, how's it going, man? It's good to talk to you. I don't think you had to deal with too much craziness with the Seahawks this week, right?
Actually, I was off duty this week. My sister had her boyfriend in town, so they took the season ticket. So I was just watching at home, and I guess I'm the good luck charm because they ended up losing that game. Really unfortunate, but happy to be on again, man. It's always great to talk guys like Simmons and Porzingis. That's part of the analysis process, is to continue to evaluate these guys into the league, and these guys have been rock stars. Yeah,
to me, breaking down how these players perform and kind of evaluating your own analysis is equally as integral as actually evaluating the players themselves, right? Like Ben Falk over at Cleaning the Glass, his awesome new website that he just kind of started up. For those who don't know, Ben is the former analytics director for the Portland Trail Blazers and the Philadelphia 76ers. He did an interesting thing on Archie Goodwin, how he was so certain on Archie Goodwin coming out of the draft and went to bat for Goodwin and did all this stuff and has continued to kind of evaluate how he missed on Goodwin. That was a really interesting story I felt this week, and I would encourage all of you to go read it. My biggest takeaway was just that you cannot have a super level of certainty on all but the most elite of the elite guys. Now, the two guys we're going to be talking about, I felt pretty good about. Like, I'd done probably more research into Kristaps Porzingis than just about anyone else, in the media, I would imagine. Like, I talked to his trainer for 45 minutes on the phone to learn more about his body. I talked to some of the coaches over in Sevilla. I talked to other people who had been over there in Spain with him. I talked to his brother before the draft. I talked to, everyone that was basically around Kristaps Porzingis and tried to learn what this dude was all about and came away feeling really good. Ben Simmons, his talent level is just so unique that you had to feel pretty good about that guy coming into the draft. But barring those guys that, have just such supreme talent levels, it's really impossible to feel just so much certainty over a guy being good. Like, I felt pretty good about Shimi Ojale being good coming into this year. Like, I felt like he was a guy that, as a second-round pick, was going to be awesome for Boston. Like, he was going to defend immediately. He would knock down threes, maybe get out and transition a little bit. He's done that, but I can't sit here and say that, like, I was dead certain that he was going to be awesome. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, and first of all, I'm going to echo what Sam said. You really need to read this Ben Falk piece. It was fantastic. I like how it captured kind of how I generally feel about the draft. It's 6 months later, and you realize how much you've learned over that time, and you look back, and you're like, how did I miss that? That just kind of captured how I feel about the entire process. You keep getting better. You keep improving in certain areas. So really great read. But, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the same with me. Echo your Semi Ojale comment with Jordan Bell. I mean, he didn't have the positional size, didn't have like that kind of imposing, but I just knew he could play basketball, and it wasn't a clear-cut translation. And yes, again, if he went to a team other than the Warriors, I wouldn't feel as good about him, but he went to a great situation, and that guy's just good at what he's good at. He plays within himself, so that's kind of the same concept. I was not as well-versed in the draft nearly as much as you in 2015 with Porzingis. I didn't do a bunch of research on him. I saw some of the clips, him shooting off down screens. I thought that was really awesome for a big, but that was kind of when I started getting into the draft. Simmons was the first elite guy that I really studied closely. He's been basically as advertised.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about Ben here, because just for those who may not be paying a crazy amount of attention to the 76ers, I find how he has not gotten like a crazy amount of media attention fascinating, right? Like, he is doing stuff that, like, I can't remember a rookie being as good as he has been. Like, was Karl Towns this good? Like, I feel like he wasn't this good.
I don't, in overall impact, because of what Ben's doing as an initiator of their offense, and that's what he is. I mean, you talk about creation possessions all the time. He's about 49% of his possessions are self-creation in the half court, so pick and roll ball handle, isolation, post-ups, and he's been efficient doing it. You just don't see primary handlers come into the league immediately and be this efficient and this impactful. Look at the rest of the league guards in the 2017 draft. All those guys are shooting really poorly for the most part. It's just really hard to be a 19, 20, 21-year-old come into the league and be strapped with this onus of creating offense for both yourself and your team, and he's doing that.
Yeah, so like Karl Towns averaged like 18, 10.5, 2 assists, 1.7 blocks. Like Karl Towns was incredible. You know, in the first 9 games of Ben Simmons' career, I think he's been better than what I remember of Towns as a rookie. Like, Simmons is averaging 18 points, 9.8 rebounds, 8.2 assists, 1.6 steals a game, 0.7 blocks. You know, the jump shooting still isn't quite there yet, although we'll kind of talk about that and how I think it's getting a little bit better. 51.6% from the field right now. 58.8% from the line is, you know, borderline disaster, and it wouldn't surprise me if we started seeing teams maybe, you know, attack him a little bit more aggressively and physically in the hopes of sending him to the line a little bit more often. But at the end of the day here, we're talking about just an elite player that, you know, I had some small questions about coming into the draft. Like, I had him very clearly as my number 1 player in the 2016 draft. Like, if you guys remember, there was a bit of a late conversation about, you know, is Brandon Ingram the number 1 guy? Is Ben Simmons the number 1 guy? You know, Mike Schmitz is a friend of mine, and I love Mike. Mike was someone who, you know, talked a little bit more about Brandon Ingram potentially being better than Ben Simmons going forward long term. I was someone who just thought that Ben Simmons' athleticism, fluidity, body control, and just overall basketball IQ would translate to the NBA. Maybe he would be a bit of a compiler on some bad teams if he started to not necessarily break out of some of the selfish habits that he showed at LSU. But I didn't really see a way for him to not be a successful NBA player. He has far exceeded what I expected of him in year 1 so far. It's just not even debatable. I mean, he's not quite as good as what Embiid was. Like, Embiid last year was incredible, and he was a rookie. Like, I guess we can throw Embiid into this conversation, but he did it over 31 games. I'll be interested to see if Ben Simmons does this over the course of an entire season and how teams adjust to kind of trying to figure out how to stop Ben.
Yeah, and again, it bears mentioning that what he's doing is just harder than a lot of the other guys what they're tasked with. Like, being a primary handler is really hard in the NBA, and he's doing that. Towns was really fluid, super efficient as a shooter. We saw all those inputs, but again, his big man defense actually his rookie year is better than of late from the off, which is kind of interesting, but he wasn't a high-level defender like Embiid was. That stuff's hard, too. The interior defense for bigs, Embiid showed that. But back to Simmons, I totally agree. I was with you in the draft. I had him as the clear consensus 1, and I don't think it was just a minor movement that had Ingram 1. Like, that was a legit debate around draft time. Like, there's a lot of people I respect who are really good at this that had Ingram 1. So it was a little bit more divisive because Simmons was so divisive. But again, a lot of that built into the character stuff, the stuff we saw about Fultz too. Like, he's on a losing team. How hard is he trying? But when you broke down his individual skills, as far as just size, athleticism, and passing, I think he's the best prospect since LeBron. I think he's the only guy that really enters that realm. He's obviously not LeBron in terms of explosiveness. LeBron's on his own planet in that regard. But he's the one guy that had that size, the ability to pass over the top. That is all translated. The passing has just been fantastic, accuracy-wise, high velocity. He really feels the game well. He's just one of those high thinkers of basketball that has a little bit more self-gravity than Alonzo Ball. We worried about Lonzo's pull-up. Simmons is just more athletic getting downhill. His size advantage is pretty noticeable there. So there's a very elite tier of guys, we'll talk about Luka Doncic in a minute, that have that really high basketball IQ and have the positional size, and Simmons combines that with athleticism. So it's just a really intriguing prospect.
Oh, wow, yeah. I would not say that he is the best prospect since LeBron.
No, I said no. Size and passing acumen sense, like the most similar to LeBron, not the best.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, that makes sense. He's just a terror in transition as well. 6'10", yes. Gets downhill immediately so quickly that it's really, really difficult to stop him. Plus the grab and go ability. That stuff again was all going to be pretty translatable. Let's kind of do a quick little deep dive here though on some of the stuff that might have been a little bit more questionable with Ben. And obviously I think that, the first place you have to start is as a jump shooter, right? That was the biggest concern. If Ben Simmons could not shoot, would he be able to have a positive impact on an NBA team, given the emphasis on pace and space and shooting the basketball in today's NBA, especially from lead guards, where, as Cole and I have discussed before, we think that shooting the basketball off the bounce is one of the most important skills for a lead guard to possess in today's NBA, just due to the pressure it can put on a defense. It creates just so much more gravity with the way that a defender has to get up on you at the point of attack, and creates so much more space for the rest of your teammates to kind of move throughout the offensive zone. So with Ben, I'm cautiously optimistic on the jump shooting so far, I would say. He's made a few elbow jumpers that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, he's made a couple of, maybe 18 feet away jumpers that, things that he would never even show at LSU. And they're shots that he has to make in the NBA because teams will just continue to go under on screens on him. However, one of the skills that he's shown so far that has immediately translated is that he can get to the corner. He can break that corner even if guys go under him on screens. Like, he's just so quick with his first step and covers so much ground that unless you're really on your shit, he can blow right by you even if you go under that screen and get all the way to the rim and finish with either hand.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what you saw early in the season. Like, Kelly Oubre for the Wizards would duck under a screen and Simmons would beat him to the point and then be able to get all the way to the rim. And he's lived at the basket. That's the biggest thing for me. I think he's like 5th in the league in attempts around the rim per game, behind like conventional centers like Whiteside, Drummond, John Collins is up there, and Rudy Gobert. So he's really living at the rim in multiple respects. And that elbow jumper, like you noted, when he gets his feet under him and he gets an open shot there, he's capable. I think he's 12 of 25 on the season, so not a huge sample, but he at least looks comfortable enough when he gets his feet under him and he pulls up from that aspect. That's huge for him. Like, it doesn't seem like much, but if he has a threat at all attacking downhill, if he can get any kind of range on that shot, I don't think he's going to shoot NBA threes. I'm not very optimistic on that. There's just no really indicator for me to feel like he's going to come up in transition and pull up for three, or when guys duck under, he's going to be able to shoot that pull up. I don't think he needs to. For me, I think that not the entirety, but a lot of his upside and ceiling is tied to how good he becomes as a finisher.
So yeah, just real quick to kind of give an idea, he is 7 from 15 from the field this season, outside of the lane, but in the mid-range. That's fine. 46%. League average, I think, is right around 40%. Particularly where he's made his hay, he's 2 for 3 from each elbow spot. He's 4 of 8 from like the little short right corner, which, all of these skills are very important to his development. If he can bring even just 16 feet in out spacing, it's going to be very, very important. It's like we see with Giannis. Giannis isn't necessarily going to knock down threes. Giannis does have a little bit better of a shot than Ben, and teams have to respect him even just slightly small, like a small amount out there. But at the same time with Ben, it's just remarkable the way that, he's just been so capable of putting pressure on the defense with his dribble. And I think that one aspect of him that I really can't underrate again, like I want to mention it again, his first step is quicker than what I think I gave it credit for. Like, he really can just cover so much ground so quickly with his dribble that it's really hard for defenders to keep in front of him. Like, he is just so big, physically powerful, and quick that I'm not like terribly worried about the jump shot being like incredibly important to keeping defenders honest anymore.
I'm with you. When guys press up on him at all, he can reject screens, go either way, and he can blow past guys. He has had no problem really getting to the rim in any respect that I've seen this year. There's sometimes like guys sag off and they play him right and he pulls up for that elbow jumper, but for the most part, he's gotten to where he's wanting to get, and that's huge. I mean, if he can get downhill, if he can get to the basket, the next step is finishing. If he can become a 70%-ish finisher at the rim, then he becomes a superstar, in my opinion. I don't think he even needs the shot, honestly. I think that's what a lot of people think, is he needs to be able to shoot, maybe even eventually threes. I don't necessarily think he has to have that. I just think he has to improve around the basket. Yeah,
he's at 63.2% right now from within 5 feet. In the restricted area, he's at 65.6%. So pretty strong numbers. Let's talk real quick about the passing. it's not just the passes that lead to assists for him. It is the hockey passes, the fact that he keeps the ball moving all the time. Like LSU, he was just so everything for them. He was so all-encompassing within their offense that he would kind of sit there, hold the ball, not really involve his teammates, and then he'd kind of make rondo passes where he would pound the ball until someone got open, and then he'd dime them. This year, he's not doing that at all. Like, he's not at all been selfish in terms of usage. He's really making sure the ball keeps moving. He's taken to this distributor role as a lead ball handler really, really well, even though he was pretty much LSU's lead initiator as well.
And he's building chemistry with Embiid. They've really developed chemistry on these 4-5 pick and rolls. You saw that late in their most recent game. I can't remember what they played, but Embiid's learning how to slip at the right time. Simmons is so precise with his passing. He can really anticipate. There's some reads that he makes where he catches the ball and immediately passes to the corner that just a lot of guys don't have that instant reaction as a passer. So I think he's everything you want in that respect. Just a couple quick numbers on the finishing to get back to that really quick. 35 of 64 at the rim in the half court, which is about the 43rd percentile. I broke it down even more than that. So when you remove cuts and putbacks, which is a huge input for him because that's where you get the advantage of being a big man, right? I mean, you get those advantages. He's 20 of 42 at the rim on drives, but when you include floaters as well, runners, it's 21 of 50. So when people say, hey, has he reached people say, has he reached the ceiling? I say no. I think that he has improvement to go there. He cuts his drive short a lot of times and takes these hard floater shots. That's just really, he has great touch on those, but it's really hard to be efficient at that. And you've even heard his coach, Brett Brown, talk about that, is taking that extra dribble, being a little bit more physical, using his body. He kind of finishes more like a guard than he does a big. If he had like Giannis's tenacity, he's not going to have that kind of length extension. He's not going to be 80% at the rim like Giannis is. But if he at least had a little bit more physicality, I think he can improve. And this is like, I'm not saying this as a negative on him. I'm saying this as there's still areas for him to become a better player. And that's one aspect I'd look at for sure.
What have you thought of his defense so far? Because, again, he didn't really show anything at LSU. That situation was just such a dumpster fire that it's hard to take anything away from it, in my opinion. But has he kind of shown more than what you expected, less than what you expected? Where are you at on his defense?
I was always relatively high on it. I didn't think he'd be an impact defender, an elite defender, because we saw him play a lot of 5 at LSU. He has his shortcomings protecting the rim, and that's translated over to the NBA. I don't think he's going to be a high-level rim protector. He can give you some weak side stuff, but he's been much more controlled in the NBA than I thought he would be. His footwork, he's rarely out of position. He seems to always be under control, closing out. That's been the most impressive thing to me, is he's not somebody who closes out really hard jumps, and he's like not a bad technique defender, and he's really quick when he's engaged. Like, he can slide laterally. He's been playing the one a lot. They're playing these like monster lineups with him initiating and guarding point guards, and you can even see him control Dennis Schroeder types some of the time. I mean, it's a tough ask to do that consistently. He picked up a couple fouls in that game, but he shows good lateral agility. I think if he plays good team defense, which he's been pretty solid at in my opinion, he can be a plus overall defender. I just don't see obviously the rim protection issues are there, but they're less concerning when you have somebody like Embiid cleaning up the back end.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to kind of note that I've been relatively surprised by how often they're playing both him and Dario Saric together. Like, they're playing them together like 15 minutes a game, which I kind of thought that they try and stagger those two a little bit more, play them some on, some off together, make sure one of them's on the floor at all times, and make sure you always have that big playmaking four who can, create plays for his teammates and also kind of get offense for himself. But they're just kind of rolling with it, and it's working so far. Like, they've been absolutely fine together from what I've seen. I'm kind of looking at the numbers right now, but, kind of anecdotally, I think that combination has worked a little bit better than at least what I expected. And I'm kind of pulling them up now. They're a little bit worse defensively when those two are on the floor together, but the offense was always the big question with those two, if they were going to be able to space the floor enough. And the offense is a few points better per 100 possessions on the floor when they both play together, which I think is an interesting development. As long as the defense comes along, as those two grow together as players, I'm kind of bullish on that from what I've seen so far, and it was something that I was not expecting to be bullish on whenever they took him. But the Saric factor was really the only fit question that I had. Like, to me, this 76ers team is the perfect fit for Ben Simmons, and fit was always kind of another knock that people had. How does Ben kind of fit within the flow of teams' offenses, given the lack of spacing. He's going to be really hard to build a team around, was another kind of question mark that people had. I think that having two guys in Joel Embiid, and we haven't seen him yet in Markelle Fultz, but like having Joel Embiid there to kind of clean up his defensive misses and being able to protect the rim himself and space the floor as a 5 is really invaluable to Ben Simmons. Having a guy that can play both on and off ball at the point guard position in Markelle Fultz, and honestly, to a lesser extent, what we've seen so far from Jared Bayless, that's another really good fit with Ben Simmons. I think having those types of point guards, having those types of players already around him before he even played a game was just so incredibly important to kind of fostering the perfect situation for Simmons.
I totally agree. I think that the fit with Embiid is tremendous. I mean, I think part of the reason that big lineup works is because they can have Embiid catch the ball from like the side post, and Simmons will usually be guarded by a smaller player, so he'll duck in and he can read the defense really well, so you can kind of invert your offense a little bit. Obviously, Sarge isn't a high-level shooter, but if he shoots reasonable enough, that's how you manufacture spacing. It's a really good fit. I'm not sure if he's going to fit that well next to Sarge moving forward. I think they've played a lot of teams like the Hawks and the Pacers who don't really have the perimeter personnel to exploit that. I think when they start playing these more dynamic guards, maybe some dynamic wings, Sarge is not going to be able to keep up with a lot of those guys, so that's something to look for. But still, I think that the fit next to Embiid, like you noted, pretty much tailor-made just because both of those guys are so versatile. And Simmons hasn't really tapped into his versatility yet, really. He's doing this predominantly isolation, pick and roll especially. We haven't seen him use that much as the roll man just because they don't have a lot of guards that could do that. You know who can do that is Markelle Fultz. If you run a 1-4 pick and roll with those two, if you trap Markelle, if his jump shot comes back and he shoots that off the dribble thing that teams have to chase over the top of screens, then you have Simmons in an advantage situation. So you're really just seeing lead guard Ben Simmons yet, like so far. He has post-up ability. He can pass out of that at a high level. He can operate as the roll man. So the best is yet to come with him, I think.
So let's talk about Kristaps Porzingis. Let's move on. I think we've talked enough about Ben at this stage. Porzingis, to me, has been the most improved player in the NBA so far. I think that's saying a lot, but I think it's accurate. Right now, he's averaging over 30 points a game, nearly 8 rebounds, 2.2 blocks, which is basically right in line with his averages, but it's obviously the points and just the general efficiency with which he's doing it right now. He's only hitting like 37% of his threes, but really it's been the finishing inside and the ability to create offense inside the arc that has been vital to his development as a go-to scorer. I remember that I got a lot of shit this summer for ranking him ahead of Nikola Jokic, despite the fact that Jokic had probably had a better career to this stage in terms of players that I would rather have going forward. I think we're seeing a lot of that untapped upside that, you know, I was a big fan of with Porzingis. What people kind of have to remember is that Porzingis really had to grow into his body. He had to continue to learn how to use that big, skinny frame and become a player that, was able to embrace contact and able to accept it and play through it. So what have been your impressions of Porzingis so far this year? I've been, just unbelievably impressed with what I've seen in terms of growth.
He's added one dynamic element to his game, and that's that self-creation component in the post. He's using about 25% of his offensive possessions there. New York's actually the 4th most efficient post team in the league on the highest usage, and that's a lot to do with him. He can just elevate over the top now. He's not so impacted by strength, so he feels comfortable just raising over the top of a lot of these fours. Like he played Thaddeus Young the other night, just elevated right over the top. He's not getting pushed off his spots as easily. If he can generate self-created offense from the post, that kind of rounds out his scoring game because he can already do so much. You have the pick and pop ability. He can come off pin downs, flares, shoot on the move. If he can add that go-to element, because that's really what he needed. He was kind of a unicorn type, of course, because he could space the floor, he could protect the rim, but could he do anything on ball? And we're seeing that now. That is manifested in his post game. And post-ups are, I think, become severely underrated in the league. This whole analytics movement has driven that out. Again, if that's the only skill that you bring, that's an issue. But for Porzingis, that's made the entire difference between being like the go-to fixture in an offense versus being a secondary kind of off-screen shooter, spot-up shooter. Awesome gravity off pick and pops because you have to stick near him. That opens up the lane for guards. So the post-ups have been the difference for me. Yeah,
look, I mean, Porzingis right now is finishing his post-up opportunities at a 1.03 point per possession clip. A 103 offensive rating may not seem all that great given that, a lot of these offenses now. I think the average is like right around 106. But you have to remember that basically every single post-up happens in half-court settings. And the half-court offensive rating, or the half-court offensive ratings for teams right now, I believe is somewhere in like the 98 to 99 range. So he's actually been extremely efficient in these post-up opportunities. He's been very efficient as a pick-and-roll, pick-and-pop big man. He's knocking down shots off of screens still. He's obviously still just incredible flashing, around the basket for easy dunks and easy little lay-ins because of his incredible length and size. The offense, again, like you said, you can't really overemphasize how important it is for him to be able to create his own offense. He's starting to, become an expert at that, Tim Duncan little off the glass, like 16-footer or even like 13-footer in the mid post that seems to have kind of gone away from a lot of players' games. He's decided to pick that up and add it. And I think it's a great addition to him just because no one can block his shot. Like, when you're 7'3" and have a 7'8" wingspan, nobody can block your shot. Nobody can affect your shot. So if you can feel consistent knocking it down from that range off the glass like that, just do it, man. Go for it.
Absolutely. And I think one area to look for again, there's always going to be some kind of rebounding trade-off with him because he doesn't have the most girth, low center of gravity. But if he's going to play the 4 some next to Kanter, that's going to be less of an issue. Long-term fit-wise, I think he profiles better at the 5, of course. I think that's where he becomes the most impactful with that pick and pop, drawing out the opposing rim protector. It's just the self-creation thing is really what I'm honing in on with him. If he can do that, I don't expect him to score over 30 a game this year. I think that'll come down a little bit. But to see this from him, because nobody else on that team can really get their own shot efficiently, and from a team building perspective, it doesn't really matter that much the current roster. But moving forward, that's a huge element to his game. That's something that Towns has more fluidly than Porzingis still. But you have to have some kind of mechanism to score, I think, to be an impactful offensive big in today's game. You have to be able to score in the post or self-creating your shot as far as, off the dribble where Towns excels, or the Jokic is passing and be able to leverage inside in the post. So we see that from Porzingis now. It's huge.
Yeah, what have you thought of his defense so far is going to be my question for you, because that's always been the question. He's always been one of the most impactful defenders at the rim, but the movement in space has always been an issue for him just because of that lankiness that, he did have a lack of lateral agility, I would say, throughout his first 2 years. What have you thought of the defensive ability so far?
I think you hit the nail on the head. They drop him back a little bit more in pick and roll now from what I've seen against like the Pacers, for example. And he can move well enough in those settings if he's playing a little bit back because he has that length to where he can still challenge shots. He's not going to be dynamic moving in space, but he's good enough that he can erase some of these mistakes, some of these half dribble advantages the teams have via his length and just his general range. So I think he's a dynamic rim protector. He can cover the area of the paint, which is why ideally you want him at the 5 to guarding those actions in that way. If you get him guarding 4s and he has to really slide on the perimeter, I think that's where he had issues, especially last year with containing dribbled penetration. Sometimes on closeouts, he's just not going to be able to change directions that well at his size. It's just tough. But I think he's an impactful defender because he can defend the rim.
Yeah, I just want to point out that opponents are shooting 28.6% from the field against him at the rim on just about 5 attempts per game. He's just so good at using verticality and so good at, staying big and just throwing his arms up and making it so that it just covers the rim like a glass case over it. He's just unbelievable at that. That is, that number is not going to hold, obviously. Like, I think last year he was in the top 5 and was like right around like the 40s. He was in the 40s, like mid 40s or so. Yeah, that's just unbelievable to me that players are shooting 28.6% against him at the rim this year.
That's insane.
Overall,
I think Gobert was between like 39 and 41 usually. So just for context, like 28%, obviously that's not going to hold to that extent, but that's an insane number.
Yeah, and you know what, like another kind of interesting aspect is I think there's been like an ancillary impact on Enes Kanter's defense at the rim. Kanter's allowing 52.4% at the rim. That's not like amazing. It's not like an awesome number by any stretch, but I think it's a slightly above average number. And for those people who've been following Enes's career to this stage, it's been really bad. Now, some of this might be a little bit of noise. Some of this might just be small sample size, but I wonder if there's a little bit of an impact on people thinking that Porzingis is going to come over from the weak side and swat their shit. And it's kind of helping Kanter out a little bit, protect the rim.
I want to say that Cantor's usually around 57 and 58%, which is pretty bad average-wise in the league. So that definitely gives credence to the numbers. That's just off the top of my head, though.
Overall, do we think that Porzingis is like going to stay at all like NBA level? Because right now I think he's probably been one of the top 2 or 3 centers in the NBA. You can maybe take away Cousins, who's been better. But, other than just a couple of guys, Porzingis has been right there in terms of unbelievable performances so far. Anytime you're averaging 30 points a game, it's really worth mentioning, especially at the center position, as well as shutting down the opposing team's paint. Does he keep this up all year, or does it just kind of drop off a little bit? No, like, does he average like 25 a game the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think it drops off a little bit, but as far as All-NBA, I think he's definitely going to be in the conversation. He just passes the eye test on film. Like, when you watch him, he looks like a different player offensively, and we know he already brought those ancillary skills, dynamic skills, defensively protecting the rim, and that post creation just gives him a different dynamic. I have no reason to think that it's going to completely drop off. Maybe he becomes slightly less efficient at it and doesn't maintain this pace, but for the most part, I don't see any reason to think that he's going to regress to an extent that he wouldn't be in the conversation for, an All-NBA team.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I'm someone who's been in on Porzingis for a long time. Like, I don't really hide that fact. You know what I mean? I will just point this out. So this year, the Knicks have a 105.5 defensive rating as a team. Porzingis is at 103.2 in terms of defensive rating. I think that lends credence to the fact that even though he's totally shutting down the paint and that defensive aspect of his game definitely outweighs the struggles that he has in space, they're still there a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's still not necessarily the most intuitive defender away from the basket.
Very much agree with that.
And he limits what you can do also in terms of, giving teams different looks in the pick and roll. You can't really blitz with Porzingis. You do just kind of have to sit him back a little bit, or, maybe even just kind of, like, you can't really hard hedge at all. You can't really do anything with Porzingis besides, either drop him back or just kind of have him play a little bit steadier and, play laterally.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best way to use him, is to drop him back slightly. Maybe not those deep drops you see some of the really immobile bigs taking, because then you just completely give up that mid-range, I think, or that pull-up three. I think Porzingis is rangy enough to where you can get him a little bit farther out to where he can contest with his length, but you want him definitely a little bit farther back so he can react to that initial move by the guard.
So, yeah, I agree. I think that he's going to be right around that All-NBA level throughout the rest of the year. Definitely an All-Star in the Eastern Conference. Probably going to start the All-Star game this year. Let's go on ahead and move on from one elite-level European prospect to another European prospect who has just taken the basketball world by storm at this stage. Luka Doncic has been absolutely unbelievable so far this season for Barcelona. Coming off of, he plays for Real Madrid. I was thinking of Rodion Kurucs. I had to do my mock draft last night, folks, and I filled out like 6,000 words of it, and my brain just stopped functioning, essentially. Luka Doncic plays for Real Madrid. Has just been totally incredible this year. He's leading the EuroLeague in scoring right now. That's unheard of for someone who is like a teenager. I can't really think of enough superlatives to say about his game. Even coming off of the incredible Eurobasket where he was on the all-tournament team, I was a little bit skeptical still in terms of how much will everything play up once he's forced to play against hyper-elite talent game in, game out, and on a consistent scale. I've been more impressed with what I've seen from him in EuroLeague and in the ACB than what I was even in Eurobasket.
He's my favorite prospect that I've ever evaluated overall. I'm not saying he's going to be I'm not saying he's the best. I just enjoy watching him the most. There's so much that he does. But before that, really quick, what position do you think he plays in the NBA? Ideally, do you think he's a primary ball handler? Or do you think he's more of a wing that can make secondarily? How do you come down on where he fits into an NBA construct?
I think he's probably more of a secondary ball handler who, he's so good at cutting off the ball that I think you want him to have the threat of both of those factors, being able to create as a secondary ball handler next to a primary point guard, as well as being able to play off ball, be able to create easy points, filling in lanes in transition, or cutting back door in the run of offense. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be allowed to grab and go on the glass whenever he gets a defensive rebound and create in the half court, but I do think that my questions about his ability to create consistent separation make me think he probably slides in better as a secondary than a primary.
Gotcha. I think that's where the analysis starts for basically everybody. How do you put him in context as far as his game translating to a certain role at the next level? I'm a little bit more bullish on his primary creator upside. I think he's so good in pick and roll. He's got a solid enough handle. He can pass over the top, and he's already so adept changing speeds, and he keeps defenders in jail already. He just does a lot of advanced things in pick and roll. I agree with you. I think if you asked him to create in isolation against more athletic wing defenders, he might struggle, even though I am pretty big on his pull-up jumper. I think that's going to bode really well for him moving forward. But ideally, I think he translates well into like an Atlanta Hawks type system where it's a motion type system, but he can create and he can be that primary guy at the end of the clock if you need somebody who can create and pick and roll. Again, isolation, you probably need another guy who can do some of that stuff because maybe he's going to struggle there. But at worst, I think he's an awesome fit in a team construct kind of player. Like you noted, the cutting, one of the biggest indicators for intelligence, that's there. You know, he's got that frame where he can finish a little bit through contact, and I believe in his spot-up shooting. He has that shot diversity off screens. So offensively, he just basically has every skill that you want with that high intellect. Again, he gets compared to kind of the Lonzo Ball types. I think he's more skilled than Lonzo is. His game translates easier to the next level because I think his handle's better, he's bigger, and he's much better pick-and-roll player. Well, so yeah, that's kind of where
to me, it's the frame as to why he's probably a better prospect than Lonzo. Like, that's Lonzo looks small in the NBA right now. You know what I mean? Like, he just looks so skinny compared to every single player he's on the floor against. Doncic is not small. Like, Doncic is, he's like an inch taller than Lonzo, but he probably has, 30 pounds on Lonzo? And
yeah, he's 220 or something, right? Or something
like he also doesn't really lose any of the athleticism game against Lonzo if you're comparing the two. Like, they're probably pretty close to the same level of explosive athletes.
Yes.
In terms of jump shooting, because that's the thing that people are a little bit concerned about with Doncic, right? Currently, he's a really good shooter off the catch, I would say. I am a little bit skeptical of him shooting off the dribble right now. So far this season, he's shot 42 times off the dribble. And this, I believe, accounts for both Spanish League and EuroLeague competition. He is at a .786 points per possession clip. That's 45th percentile among all international players. So 39.3 assisted field goal percentage. His ball pickup isn't like super clean coming up off the catch or off the dribble, in my opinion. He really does just need to kind of continue to iron that out. And I think that that's going to be a major, major key for him as a primary or secondary ball handler. I think the key for me is that I'm almost always going to want to play him with another primary ball handler. Like that could be someone like Giannis, that could be someone like Ben Simmons, but you know, those guys are so few and far between that I would imagine that you're just always going to want to play him with another guy who is effective enough at initiating offense.
I think that's fair. I think that the pull-up jumper point was spot on. If that kind of ties into his ceiling for me. His development there, I'm not saying he's a finished product. I like his ability to shoot over the top. He shows that step-back ability. But that's going to be key. I mean, he has to have that, and that probably has to be sub-elite to elite to be an elite offensive player in an on-ball role because he's not that explosive athlete. He's going to blow by guys, finish explosively at the rim. He's going to need to have that skill game, all the tricks as far as changing speeds and then get to that pull-up, which he has to speed up his release a little bit. Yep. But I think he's definitely got workable mechanics. I don't look at his shot, and I'm not concerned. I think that it's not a shoe-in to be able to shoot well. I agree with that. I don't think he screams like elite shooter from the off. I think that he's capable, and he has the foundation at least to become that.
You kind of mentioned being able to change speeds, change directions. I think he kind of has all that already. You know what I mean? Like, he has all of the craft that you could ask for from a guy that's his size, 6'8" or whatever he is, playing in pick and roll settings. Like, he's so crafty at changing direction. He's so crafty at, that little hesitation dribble that he has. He is just so skilled with the ball in his hands.
And again, we should note the passing and pick and roll, I think, is elite.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think he's already there as far as making reads. I mean, he can read that weak side guy in high velocity skips to the corner right on the money, like pinpoint accuracy. That's what I like about him so much, is because he does translate in multiple respects, at least foundationally. What do you think about his defense? I mean, that's where the criticism really comes because of the athletic limitations. For me, I really like that he competes and tries as hard as he does. He has good physicality, that frame great rebounder. I don't think he's going to be like a weak side rim protector like Dynamo, but he shows flashes of that. What do you think of his D?
So I just want to point out the pick and roll statistics real quick too. So according to Synergy so far this year, among all international players and all international competition, and I'm okay doing this because if anything, Doncic should be hurt by something like this, given the fact that he's playing in the two strongest competitions overseas, the Euro League and the Spanish ACB League. He is second among the 519 players who have 70 pick and roll possessions this year in points per possession whenever you include his passes. He's averaging 1.3 points per possession whenever a play finishes out of his pick and roll, either with his assist or his own scoring. He's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and how many 6'8", 6'9" guys do you really have to chase in an ideal setting over the top of a screen and pick and roll, and then he can read the floor like he can? Like, it's unreal. Like, his passing and his ability to throw over the top, make pretty much every pass possible is incredible. Yeah.
In terms of defense, look, I don't think he's going to be like an all NBA defender. I don't even know that he's going to be like a super above average defender. I think that maybe his ceiling is like slightly above average, but more than likely he's going to be a guy that you just kind of allow to play really smart team defense. He doesn't really ever get out of position. Like, he is a smart defender. He is pretty good from what I've seen, at least, at kind of getting his hands into passing lanes and creating kind of those action plays that you look for defensively. He's not going to be like a secondary rim protector or anything, meaning you probably don't want to play him as like a small ball four, but he's skilled enough to where you don't have to. I don't think. I think that you're looking at, just your run of the mill average defender who isn't going to fuck up.
Yeah, that's really well put. I do like how physical he is in his frame. I think he's going to compete. And when you have those kind of fringe athletic guys, he's not great laterally. I think if he has to switch on to lead guards, he's going to really struggle in those situations. Sure. But those fringe guys, what I like when those guys have is high motor and intensity, and he at least tries. So that's going to make up for some of the negatives of his athleticism. I don't view him as an impact defender necessarily in terms of a one-on-one sense. I think he can be a plus team defender. And, yeah, I mean, for that situation, that's really all you need is for a guy not to be a liability. And his frame and his strength, it's not like guys are going to headhunt him, I don't think, and pick and roll and then just try to attack him every single time. Maybe with some lead guard matchups you do that. But for the most part, I don't view him as a guy that's going to be a complete liability on that end. I think he might actually be passable.
Yeah, so I have him at number one going into the year. I think that it's just basically impossible not to. From what I know, over the last 2 decades, I want to say that Pau Gasol was the most productive, European basketball player entering his draft year, kind of given, accomplishments in international competition and accomplishments in club competition and statistics and everything like that. Gasol did it at like 21. He averaged, I want to say, like 12 points a game and was super useful and obviously went third overall for a reason. Doncic is considerably more accomplished than what Pau Gasol was entering like his year. He's totally something we have not seen before as a European prospect, and I'm fascinated to see how this all works out. If you made me bet on if he will be the number one overall pick, I would probably take the field. Like, if it was Doncic versus the field, I would take the field. I think that, we'll talk about Michael Porter in this podcast. We'll talk about, Marvin Bagley in the future and DeAndre Ayton in the future. But, like, those three guys to me really stand out as super, super high ceiling type players that could surpass him. And ultimately, I don't know that Luka is going to be able to answer some of the questions that people have about him long term this season, just because there's going to be a little bit of a concern about how the numbers translate in terms of, European competition and style of play. But look, to me, it's just impossible not to have him at number one right now. What we're seeing so far is just flat out unprecedented for a European teenager.
Yeah, it's going to have to take a pretty Herculean effort by either Porter or Ayton to me to surpass him. Ayton being like suddenly becoming a defensive dynamo and Porter being able to handle in tight spaces and play high-level defense. But right now, I think Doncic is pretty clearly, for me, number one. It's going to take a lot from somebody else performing at the NCAA level to surpass him.
Well, you know what else we got going on? We got a sponsor coming up. This episode is sponsored by Greats, makers of the all-time greats, classic, stylish, and comfortable sneakers sold at a great price. Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They sell all the greats, classic styles, made the best for less. There is a wide selection of men's and women's styles, versatile, suitable for any occasion. There are tons of different colors and materials to choose from. Their best sellers include the all-leather Royale lace-up and the Wooster slip-on. Like I tell you guys all the time, I have a pair of greats. I use them regularly. They are just an invaluable contribution to my wardrobe because they are so versatile in the amount of events you can wear them for. You can check those out along with lots of other great styles at greats.com. We've got a special deal for our audience. Save 15% on your first order with our offer code GAMETHEORY. Go to greats.com. That's GREATS.com. And be sure to enter Game Theory to save 15% at checkout. Greats also believes so much in their shoes, they offer a no-risk return and exchange policy to guarantee that you get the right fit in a style you love. That's greats.com and use our code GAMETHEORY to save 15%. Let's talk about Michael Porter. Cole, how much of Michael Porter have you seen? And before I cede the floor to you, I do just want to say we're going to kind of break down combo forwards in the rest of this podcast. We're going to try and keep it to half an hour at this stage, but who the hell knows? How much of Porter have you seen so far?
I've seen quite a bit of him, actually. He played at Nathan Hale his senior year of high school, and that's about 15 minutes from my house. So I've seen quite a bit of him in person. Saw him at Les Schwab when he played Marvin Bagley down there last December. So quite a bit.
What are your overall impressions? Because he seems to be someone that people are universally high on at this stage. And, just to kind of fill out the rest of Porter's, background here. Porter had always been considered a super high-level prospect, a 5-star prospect. His senior year, though, is the year where he really went from, your run-of-the-mill top 7 prospect or top 6 prospect in his class to being the absolute elite of the elite, number 1 overall player in this class, considered, I think, by everyone but Scout.com in terms of the reputable recruiting services. Scout had DeAndre Ayton there. I think that's totally defensible. The thing that Porter kind of developed over the course of the last year that people kind of wondered about with him was toughness. Is he going to be a consistently tough enough player when met with adversity? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that as a 6'10", 230-pound freak athlete who can score from all 3 levels, he saw a ton of adversity in high school from a defensive scheme perspective, but he did at least start to embrace playing through contact a little bit better. You could kind of knock him off his game a little bit earlier in his career just by playing physically against him. That stuff's gone by the wayside. Cole, what have been your impressions so far of what you see from his game?
It's really hard to analyze these guys in high school because they rarely ever meet any kind of worthy opponent as far as physical tools, athleticism. So really all you can really judge is, in my opinion, shooting ability and just general athleticism. And he has both of those things in spades. His shooting, mechanics-wise, watching him at the hoop summit up close, high release, great elevation, good arc. He kind of reminds me of Rudy Gay as far as shooting. I mean, everybody gets really freaked out whenever you compare anybody to Rudy Gay, but just the ability to elevate over the top of guys. You rarely see that from a 6'10 guy. He can really just... I've seen him full speed up the court in transition and just pull up on a dime from 25 feet and knock it over 3 guys. That's not very common.
It's the fluid way that he elevates for his jump shot. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly that. So when I think about his shooting and how it profiles, that's where you start with him, is just like you said, the fluidity combined with the shooting ability. He's not like a 10 as far as explosiveness. He's probably more like an 8, but he's explosive enough to where he just makes it look really easy. He gets off the floor so easily. So it starts with the shooting. You profile that to an NBA setting. He really does bode well to shoot off pin downs, over contests, pull-ups over in mid-post situations. I do think he has primary scorer equity from the wing who can swing to the 4 spot, and that's insanely valuable in today's game.
I agree with everything that you just said. He is an incredible 3-level scorer. His versatility off the dribble is really impressive for a guy at 6'10". He really can create kind of by himself in a way that many players his size can't. To me, that's the biggest aspect of his game that makes him intriguing. He's really, really tough on the offensive glass, I would say as well. Aggressive, tries to get his own rebounds, really good at crashing the glass and creating new opportunities for his teammates via tips. We'll see how much that translates. We'll see how much, Konzo forces him to get back on defense this year at Missouri, how much they allow him to crash, given the fact that they have both Jeremiah Tillman and Jonte, his brother, in that scheme there. How much does he play the 4 versus the 3? I think he's very clearly a 4 at the next level. We can talk about positional versatility and all of these different factors. Porter is going to be the guy that you want guarding the second tallest player on the opposing team, essentially, which for me kind of connotates with playing the 4. He's going to allow teams to have like that matchup nightmare quality where they're going to be able to play big while still retaining the small ball pace and space equity that every team is looking for right now. I mean, it's why players like Paul George are so valuable. It's why players like Carmelo Anthony, to me, are still so valuable despite Melo's shortcomings. That ability to play big while maintaining, skill, it just helps your defense so much just due to how much ground you can cover defensively, even if, you're a lackadaisical defender, as in Melo's case.
I agree. I think that's where he's going to see his value at the next level spike is when playing the 4. I think he can start at the 3. He can shoot well enough to space there. Do you want him chasing around wings? I think he's probably capable of that. But really to have that plus value, you want him playing the 4 as much as possible, whether that be when he adds enough strength to anchor there in superior fashion or whatnot. But we already see like Jason Tatum's playing minutes at the 4. Yep. Porter's a legit 6'10". Like he has 4 measurables, maybe not the girth yet, but he has a lot of things working for him in that capacity. My issues with him aren't really issues. They're more like I don't know if he can do them yet or not because we haven't seen it on like an established level. How good is his floor game? How good is his feel as a passer? At Hoop Summit, he didn't really show a lot there. He had a couple like nice driving drop-offs. He had one lob pass to Bonga, I want to say. That was the first time he really showcased any of that. How refined is his handle in tight spaces? I know he can create for himself in like a mid-post setting. Can he run a pick and roll? And then the defense, of course. How elite is that? Saw some weak side rim protection at the Hoop Summit. I think he's capable there. How good is he in space? Those are questions that he has to answer. Yeah,
I agree with all that. I have him at number 3 on my board. You probably have him at number 2, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah, because you're a little bit less high on Marvin Bagley than I am. We'll talk about Bagley next week. That will probably be Cole and I's first vehement disagreement on this podcast because I'm very high on Bagley and Cole is not particularly a fan. Let's go on ahead and move on. Let's talk about Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges kind of shocked the basketball world returning to Michigan State last year. In the last quarter century, no high major freshman has averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists per game and then decided to return to college basketball. Bridges decided to make that choice, and everyone makes the choice that is right for them. In terms of emotional maturity, I've never heard a bad word about him. So, I don't think it was a case where he felt he needed to grow as a person or, do some of the things that, people that are 18 and 19 years old sometimes need by staying in college and staying in a very controlled atmosphere. He's just a kid that wanted to get to the Final Four and get Tom Izzo another national championship and, stay in a place where he was comfortable with, Tum Tum Nairn, who I know he's very, very close with, and some of the other guys on that team, that vaunted sophomore class who all returned this year from Michigan State. For me, I had Bridges in my top 10. I was a little bit higher on him than what most people were entering the draft. Where are you at on Bridges entering this year?
Yeah, we were pretty much in lockstep on Bridges last year. I think I probably had him top 8. I might have even moved him higher at that point. I was a really big fan of him.
I had him at 8,
yeah. So I think we're pretty much in cahoots about Bridges here. I think he's best if you can leverage kind of his frame and his skill at the 4. I'm not saying they're exactly the same kind of player, but he just kind of reminds me a little bit of Aaron Gordon. He's not as good laterally as far as defensively, but just putting him in bigger spaces where he can play make, I think that's where his value is going to be because he has that frame. I know he lost some weight this year to play more of the 3 due to their personnel situation, but ideally in the NBA to have like that plus value, despite like the lackluster length, I think you'd want him at the 4 because he can do so much there as like what you've called in the past a connecting piece.
Yeah. To me, that's what he is. He's kind of your prototypical lineup connector, like a guy that is going to allow you to play super small if you want to play him at the 4. He's tenacious enough on the glass, kind of like Jason Tatum, where you wouldn't think Tatum's going to be really good on the glass, but he is. Bridges is the same deal. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to attack the defensive glass strong enough to, outplay his size maybe. I mean, overall, the biggest question that I have about Bridges going forward, I think he's a really smart, intuitive passer. I think that his creation ability off the bounce is okay. I don't think it's like anything incredible, but he's good enough at it to attack out of like the triple threat position where he catches in a spot up situation, pump fakes, and can finish at the rim because he's so strong and take a couple dribbles to get there. My biggest thing is the jump shot. He shot 40% from 3 last year, like thereabouts. I don't know that I trust those mechanics right now to be a 40% three-point shooter or even like a 34, 35, 36% three-point shooter from the NBA line.
Yeah, the pull-up is just not there. 8 of 39 on pull-ups. That's part of the reason I see him more as a 4, not a 3. I don't think he's going to create one-on-one off the dribble in like a mid-post setting. Just that low release. He has more of a set shot that profiles better off the ball as far as spotting up. I think if he has enough space with longer closeouts at the 4, he can be okay. I don't think he's a lock to shoot by any means, but he at least has workable enough mechanics to where you think he can get there off the catch. He showed a little bit off screens, not much last year, but he shot a couple pin downs that were kind of interesting. But overall, again, I think it just profiles more to that big space kind of ball handler. You look at indicators like he handled the ball in pick and roll settings as the ball handler, I think 27 possessions last year. You look at other guys that are similar to that. And obviously this is not an all-inclusive stat because it's how these guys are utilized first and foremost. But Ben Simmons, Draymond Green, Aaron Gordon, those kind of guys you see on that list. So that just speaks to the fact that this guy has ball skills in big spaces. If he can shoot the ball and he has the threat of that, he has the explosion, the speed, to power element where he can really finish off 2 when he loads up at the basket. He can absorb contact. There's just a lot of skills to work with if he's placed in the right situation.
Yeah, and defensively, like you said, not like a super defender, doesn't have like a crazy amount of length, but he's a smart defender, really good team defender, explosive enough to block weak side shots in a significant manner. He's maybe one of the best athletes vertically in this draft. I think that's worth pointing out as well. He is just an unbelievable vertical athlete, head above the rim type of potential dunk contest winner one day. I'm contractually obligated to mention you should go find the dunk on YouTube where he just like stole the soul of some poor kid in the Bahamas, where like it's just unbelievable. He cocks it like all the way back behind his head and just like ends this kid at the rim. I felt really bad, but you should go watch it. It's unbelievable. Yeah, to me, he's more of like a 3rd, 4th, 5th starter than like a, superstar level potential player. But that's totally okay. I think it's fine to take that guy at 7, 8, 9, 10 in the draft and be fine with it. I'm interested to kind of see how it all works out this year. It wouldn't surprise me if a guy like Kevin Knox surpassed him at some point, and we'll lead into him next, or someone like a Lonnie Walker or like a Hamidou Diallo. Like we just find that guy has a little bit more upside than Miles Bridges, and he slides down the draft boards a little bit. But it's kind of hard for me to see him falling out of like that top 15 range just because of what we know already.
Yeah, I'm 100% with that.
So let's talk about Kevin Knox. How much of Knox have you seen so far?
I've seen him twice in person. I think I saw him once at Nations and then Hoop Summit. So a little bit. I watched some preseason highlights. I don't really watch preseason basketball that much in college as far as the actual games. I'll just kind of peruse over the highlights. So I've seen a little bit.
So what was your impression of him? For those who don't know, 6'9", like 220 pounds. I think he has like a 7-foot wingspan. Really good athlete. Also really young for his class. He's still going to be 18 years old on draft day.
Yeah, I think I have the worst sample of him. Every time I see him play, it just seems like he never plays well. So, like, I know what the allure is. I can see it in the flashes, but he just doesn't ever play well when I see him play. Like, his IQ doesn't seem great. His shot selection was just horrendous throughout the week at Hoop Summit. It was, like, kind of a disaster. And his ball skills just didn't really see that. Falls in love with his
jumper a little bit too much.
Exactly. Yeah, and he profiles better, I think, off the ball than on. I haven't seen a lot of handling, shake, or agility with the ball. I know he can straight line slash. He's really fluid, got the long strides, but he looks like he's best as a combo, like more of a 4 than just like a 3 and a 4. I don't know if that's on base or not, but that's just kind of what I've seen from him.
Yeah, I think he's a 4. He's like the prototypical, like modern, like playmaking 4. You know what I mean? The one skill that I don't think he's flashed a ton of yet in the minutes that I've seen him play as well is the passing ability, and that's something that I think he needs to work on. But he's a decent enough shooter from three. I wouldn't say he's like an awesome shooter from three, but I do think he has like a more functional jumper than Miles Bridges does, for instance, even if the percentages didn't necessarily kind of prove that throughout their high school careers. Grab and go guy in transition, can really handle the basketball in space. In the half court, definitely a straight line driver, but he has a really quick first step and can get the space that he needs to get that kind of to get past that first line of the defense in the half court setting and get into the middle of the defense and hopefully make plays from there. Good athlete vertically. Wouldn't say he's like a 10 out of 10 vertically. Would say he's probably maybe just a slight step above Porter. Would you agree with that?
That seems, from what I've seen, pretty reasonable, especially off 2 feet. I think he's a pretty good leaper when he can load up.
Yeah, and again, like he's one of these guys, 6'9", that's going to derive a lot of his value from allowing teams to stay big while playing small. That's a really valuable skill set. There's like a little bit of like Paul Georginess to him in a way, and it took George a long time to kind of figure out how to harness his skill set. People obviously know that George went to Fresno and was not like some super high level recruit. Obviously, kind of took him a year or two to figure it out in the NBA even, but once it all clicked, it clicked. I see that same kind of fluidity in Kevin Knox at that size, like that same kind of athleticism at that size. We don't know how the jump shooting is going to come around. Like Paul George has become like an elite level shooter. We have no idea if Kevin Knox is going to get there, but I see that same kind of athleticism, that same kind of body control that Paul George has in Kevin Knox.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I was going to mention the jump shooting, of course, because that's where Paul George gets his input, is coming off those pin downs. He can shoot pull-ups really fluidly. I think Knox has simple mechanics, it looks like, for the most part. He gets good arc, but something's just off about it. I think it's just a control issue, maybe. It just never seems
to me. Like it's not always in rhythm.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just something has been off whenever I've watched him shoot. When you watch him in like practice, when he's shooting off the catch from three, he looks really fluid. He has NBA range even from that setting, but a lot of guys can shoot in practice. I just haven't seen it translate to a game setting. And the passing stuff that you noted is huge. I think that's an area where if he can really develop as a passer, if he can take 2 dribbles or 1 dribble and pass on a skip pass, for example, because he can definitely attack closeouts. He has the first step. If he has the shot respect, that's kind of what I want to see from him. How good does his feel in the half court?
Let's move on. Let's talk about Justin Jackson. I think you're super high on Justin Jackson, aren't you?
Not as high as Jonathan Sharks, but I'm high.
Where does Sharks have him?
I think he had him, I want to say like 6 or something.
Oh, good God.
I don't know. Don't hold me to that. I feel like they did some Ringer big board preseason thing, and he was really high on him. I'm more like the late teens-ish ranking.
Yeah, I have him at 22 right now in the thing I just sent off last night. So 6'7". I think he has like a 7'3" wingspan. Is that right?
Yes.
So 225 pounds. Kind of profiles is that combo forward, maybe even small ball center kind of guy in today's NBA where everyone can play big as long as you have enough size and length. Shot 43% from 3 last year. I don't know that I buy that number as being totally accurate. Do you?
I'm buying it tentatively. I'm higher on his jump shot. I really like his mechanics. He's got that smooth one motion release. He looks really comfortable off the catch. Flashes the ability to shoot off motion as well as a little bit off the dribble. But yeah, I'm not buying him as like a shoe-in 43% NBA shooter, but I am very high in his mechanics.
Yeah, like I think that right now I kind of see him as like an above average shooter, not an elite shooter.
That's fair.
The thing that scares me is the athleticism. I don't really buy him much at all athletically. Like, he shot 43% from 2-point range last year, was, I think, 54% in the half court at the rim last year, despite all that length. I think that you can kind of throw some of this into getting unlucky in transition to, he shot, I think, something like 4 of 17 in transition last year, and that's just incredibly strange more than anything. Like, it's not normal and not something that you'll see happen all that often. I just don't know that I buy him as like a crazy athlete. I think he can have use because he's a mobile defender who can guard multiple spots and can knock down shots, and he can do it on the move. And like you said, he does have the one motion mechanics. That's good. I don't know that I buy him enough yet from an athleticism perspective to go and say like he should be a lottery pick. I think the upside is there, but I think he needs to show me a lot more athletically for me to buy into that.
Yeah, the finishing is almost kind of red flag worthy. I mean, he's a below the rim athlete when he drives. He does not have that vertical pop that you see with a lot of these guys. And you see that also as a weak side rim protector. He just doesn't have that dynamic bounce. Yeah. Defensively is where it comes down for me. I'm not totally sold on his lateral agility. I think it's okay. I think it's fine. He's more of a technician than anything. Like, I like the way he defends. He doesn't foul a lot. He's in good position, but I think the athleticism point you made was a good one. That is kind of where I see the issues, as well as the passing. Like, you'd think he'd be a better passer with his reputation, but that guy is not a good decision maker.
Yeah, no, that's the next thing I was going to bring up. Yep.
So I would like to see that element of his game improve. I know he's probably going to get more on-ball chances this year. I don't see him as any kind of on-ball guy. I think he's more of a big space, attack closeouts, make a pass. But we haven't even really seen that. Like, he misses drop-off passes consistently last year. I went back and watched him this summer, and I like elements of his game. I think the length, of course, the strength is fine. He's not the most physical guy. He's okay there. Again, I just like the fact that he's kind of a technician defensively. He doesn't foul a ton, and he has that hypothetical or conceptual switchability with his frame and his length.
Yeah, to me, it's just a lot of, I mean, like, outside of the shooting and the body, he just has a lot, like, a big ways to go, I guess.
Agreed.
I need to see a lot more to think that, like, he belongs anywhere near the conversation with, like, Miles Bridges. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think he can dribble okay. Like, that's something I've noticed with him in the past. Even at Hoop Summit, he was there 2 years ago for the international team, and he can handle the ball pretty well, even in traffic at times. Like, he has a low handle. He had a couple nice crossovers that I saw. It doesn't profile to, like, an on-ball, like, legitimate role, but he can grab and go a little bit if the passing's there, but that's a huge question.
Let's move on, talk about Jared Vanderbilt real quick. Vanderbilt's going to be out until January with a broken foot. For those of you who aren't super familiar with him, he's going to Kentucky, 6'9", like 7-foot wingspan. Crazy high feel for the game in terms of acting as a point forward. Really, really good passer. Can grab and go, can handle in transition. Can even do like some change of direction stuff in transition where like he does like behind the back dribbles and like all of that jazz. The feet are going to be a question for NBA teams. This is now, I think, the second or third foot injury that he's had that has been significant. Lower body strength is a pretty significant concern. He's a switchable defender, though. He's athletic. How much of Vanderbilt have you seen so far?
He was another Hoop Summit guy, so I've seen him quite a bit over that course of that week. He was actually the best player on the court at sometimes during those practices. I think that was the first one at the Nike campus where you just really saw all the grab-and-go handling stuff. Like, he's really good as a ball handler. He can get low. He's shifty with the ball for his size. You just don't see that kind of change of direction ability. He's fluid. I would say he's more of a fluid athlete than explosive. He's pretty skilled, though, overall. Not an explosive finisher. Has some craft around the rim with his left, especially on his floater. Projects as like that playmaking 4 type. I think he is a 4 only from what I've seen of him. I don't know if he has that much skill or size diversity. Has some vision on the move. Had a couple really nice instinctive touch passes that I've seen him make. And rebounding, he looks passable as a rebounder. He's just more of a relentless kind of guy. He has pretty good instincts on that end. But like basically the concern with me revolves around the shooting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The jump shot is a total mess. Hitchy, just not very good. Like no rhythm at all to it. Like it's a stage one or like a page one rewrite, to use like a Hollywood term. Like whenever you have to totally rewrite a script because it's just not very good. But like the concept is maybe worth pursuing. You call it a page one rewrite. His jump shot is a page one rewrite to me. I have him at number 28 on my board entering the year just because of some of those versatile skills that we talked about. But I'll just be interested to see how he comes back from this foot injury, to see how worthwhile he is as a prospect.
Yeah, I'm about in that range. I think I have him low 20s just because of the intrigue with some of the skill level. The shooting, you'd like to see some sample in college that he puts on tape. I think he angles his feet a little bit better, maybe keeps his elbow in more consistently now. But again, you noted that hitch. It's just not a lot. There's no real reason to be confident in it right now. If he shows a better sample, could probably get there. It's just someone who has NBA skills. It's just maybe the most important one, being shooting, isn't there at this point.
How much of the UCLA combo forwards have you seen so far?
Very minimal. I was going to rely on you here for this.
So let's start with Chris Wilkes. Chris Wilkes, like 6'7", 6'11" wingspan. Really, really intriguing. He's been very impressive apparently this summer, kind of playing at those pickup games at the vaunted UCLA practice facility. Really, really good touch in the lane, can shoot some floaters, really good touch around the basket, really explosive athlete, especially vertically, has the potential to be a really, really strong defender. He's working on the jump shot. He's still not quite there yet. Kind of a guy to watch for the future. I think I'm going to have him in the top 50, but for those of you who know me, I don't rank freshmen at this stage outside of the top 30. If I was putting him on a board, he'd be in the top 50, but not quite there yet. Chris Smith is a guy who's gotten some attention recently. Mike Schmitz put him on his draft board. I think is a top 5 small forward in this class. Mike's super smart. I think that upside is totally there with Chris Smith. He is a long way to go, though. He's going to be one of the youngest players in this freshman class, I believe. You think he's just straight up 18 years old. Should be a senior in high school. He reclassified. Definitely a slasher, transition player, 6'8", long arms. Not like a super, super wild athlete, but a guy that has all of these skill sets, has all of the skills in the world in terms of handling the basketball. UCLA is essentially calling him a guard, is a big ball handler who can create, with the ball screen and who can, get into the teeth of the defense and make things happen. He's going to legit play this year, despite being I think a guy who was outside of the top 100 on most scouting services. He's a guy that was way underrated by those things. And I would not be surprised if we look back and Chris Smith is, breaking out during his sophomore year and ends up being a top 15 pick.
Yeah, from the little I've seen of him, I kind of like his jump shot. It looks clean enough, fluid, has that high release point, pretty good touch on the floater, and it looks comfortable pulling up. So, like you noted, he does look comfortable with the ball. I'm not sure how shifty he is or what his first step is. That'll take more watching. But, yeah, I think there's definitely an intrigue there. It's,
the entire skill set just isn't quite there yet. But, I think it will get there. You know what I mean? It's just it's still missing the glue. The pieces are still missing the glue. And once the glue comes together, he's going to be ridiculous. And I don't think it's insane to have him that high. Arnoldas Kulboka is a guy that I've been really high on for a while. Finally starting to produce a little bit. He, I believe, is on loan right now, playing in Italy, in First Division Italy for Capo d'Orlando, averaging 10 points a game on a 63% true shooting percentage. I liked him a little bit more, I'm not going to lie to you, when he was a 6'8" combo forward. He's since grown to be between 6'10" and 6'11", and he's truly a stretch 4 now, and he's just so skinny that I don't know if he's going to be able to kind of fill out that position and the needs that are going to come up defensively with that. But you've seen a decent amount of him. I'm sure you've watched some tape on him. Do you like him at all? Or are you still are you like me and think he's a potential first-round pick?
I don't know yet. I've seen enough of him to have an opinion. I'm not sure about a ranking opinion yet. I get the intrigue for sure. That size, when you can shoot the ball like he can fluidly, off over closeouts, over contests, off the catch, on some pull-ups. Yeah. There's intrigue. I mean, at a certain point in the draft, you get to guys and you're like, who has an NBA skill, who has positional size? And he answers both questions as far as that goes. He's a pretty fluid athlete, can seem to attack closeouts relatively fluidly in straight lines, not very explosive, and the frame is a huge issue, of course. Not explosive, poor finisher around the rim for the most part, lacks that vertical pop. Ball skills, I haven't really seen enough to have an opinion as far as him as a passer or a ball handler, and the defense is the main concern for me, is the physicality. If he's going to be a stretch 4, can he fight in the post? Doesn't look like that projects well, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely intrigue. I get the allure with him.
Emmanuel Acott, have you seen a ton of him yet?
I saw him a long time ago. I don't have any strong opinions on him.
So yeah, Canadian, 6'8". He's gonna start for Arizona this year, I think. Just while Raleigh Alkins is out, particularly due to, I believe Raleigh has a fractured foot right now. Interesting player because he's 6'8" with 6'10" wingspan or so. Really, really good defender though. Multi-positional defender basically immediately upon entering college. The offensive game, I still have some questions. He's a good slasher, has the frame already to finish at the rim at least. Explosiveness-wise, I would say good explosiveness, not elite explosiveness. But the multi-positionality, the ability to knock down the occasional three, that's going to at least make him a guy to watch this year. Again, I think he might be like a 2-year player still, but definitely a guy that is going to be on NBA radars for a little bit of time here going forward.
I think I remember watching him U16 for Team Canada, and that was in my notes as far as the switchability on defense. That was the thing that stuck out to me the most, is his ability to move on the perimeter is really alluring.
Yeah. Couple of other guys here that I just kind of want to run through real quick. PJ Washington. Do you have any thoughts on PJ Washington?
I've heard some Kentucky guys say he's their best prospect. I've never seen it in an established setting. I get the allure with the frame, 237 pounds with a 7'3" wingspan, kind of like an ideal, maybe small ball 5, has that powerful frame, enough fluid athleticism to play in transition, and a little bit of a multifaceted skill game. He has a face-up game. I like his shooting a little bit. I think he might be comfortable on pick and pops from mid-range. I'm not sure about that extending to NBA 3. He looks pretty comfortable there. Good toucher on the rim, on that jump hook, and he looks physical enough as a rebounder. He's just not very explosive around the basket. And how does that project as a finisher? How good are his feet on defense? I've seen him get boat raced in space a couple times. I'm not sure if I'm getting a bad sample or he can actually slide in space. That's huge for him. Maybe he can provide some weak side rim protection. But overall, it's kind of like a 4-5 hybrid type in the next level. Maybe an ideal small ball 5 if he can kind of anchor in select settings.
Yeah, super energy, though. Like, plays with such a high motor. It would not surprise me if he is Kentucky's most productive player this year by any stretch. He's going to really cause a lot of issues for college basketball players just due to that length, due to that motor, due to the fact that, from 16 feet and in, he is a really efficient scorer. So, yeah, I like him a decent amount, but, from an NBA perspective, kind of in that same, like, Chris Wilkes range for me. Like, he's more of a, top 60 guy than, like, a potential first-round pick right now. Bonzie Colson is the most unique player in college basketball to me, and I know that you can't say, like, most unique. You can't really qualify unique. But, like, there's just really no one else like Bonzie Colson. He is wholly unique. Do you think he has a chance to play in the NBA even?
I think he does. I think, definitely most unique player I've seen in a while. I mean, he's so stoutly built in the upper body, and he has enough skill game. I mean, he can shoot a set 3. He's a good free throw shooter. He has that quick release. Sometimes shoots off balance and leans backward kind of awkwardly, but for the most part, he seems skilled enough to maybe thrive in a small ball, kind of 4 or 5. He has that physicality, the intensity that you look for. It's just not very explosive. And again, just looking from a pure positional standpoint, it's hard to carve out a role for someone like this. But again, the league's gone more versatile. Positions matter less. Maybe he fits in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean, 6'5", like barrel-chested, 7-foot wingspan. So size is like a 4. I think he could probably do it. Like, I don't know for sure, but I think like the potential is there for him to do it. Defensively is the biggest concern. Like, he can shoot threes now, which is really important. He's going to be able to go up through people, which is really, really important. But I just have no idea who he defends. I have absolutely zero idea.
What's his lower body strength like? I know his upper body looks just ridiculous, but lower body, can he anchor at all?
He's good enough to at least, like, hold his position on the block, and he can rebound. But, like, long term, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be good enough with that. Like, he's like 225 pounds, 230 pounds, and has that barrel chest. So, like, his legs aren't like super, super big, That's
my impression watching him. The upper body was pretty obvious, but in many cases, lower body matters more for bigs when you're trying to anchor on the glass. Like, Chuck Hayes was awesome at this. Like, one of those undersized guys who just really leverages position. I think that Colson would have to do that probably to be, a serviceable defensive player. I'm not sure how good he is defending in space, but he has to be able to anchor on the glass at some point. And if he could do that at the 5, even if that low center of gravity being 6'5", I think there's some matchups in the league where you could play him at that position. I think that's where his value would really come, but that's a very select case.
Alize Johnson, do you have any thoughts on him?
I watched him a little bit. I haven't seen too much of him. I know Schmitz had a video about him a while back. You can kind of see the former point guard in him trickle over to some of his transition game, but that's kind of what I saw mostly is like he can play make in transition. I didn't see a ton in as in the half court as like a shooter or a scorer. Kind of a weak base as far as a shooter. His knees collapse in. Mechanics don't look super consistent from what I've seen. He's a good rebounder, so that's good to see. And he is quick on defense on the perimeter. He hunches over a little bit too much, but the quickness is there. Just really average tools and explosiveness, and how well, again, does the game translate to the half court.
So I like the fact that he's fluid at 6'9". I'm not like super long, but he's definitely going to be able to move his feet really well. Jump shot to me is probably the most interesting part of his game. Like I think he can actually like kind of pick and pop and knock down shots now. He was the MVP of this year's Adidas Nations among the college guys. He's really seemed to take that like next step going forward. I believe he's injured right now, so I don't know if we're going to get to see him early on in the year, but like it's kind of amazing. Like he grew like over a foot in, I want to say, like 2 years of high school, and is just like a very unique player due to that skill set, as you kind of mentioned. So yes. The key is he going to be able to rebound consistently to me? Like, is he going to be able to deal with the physicality of playing that like stretch four, like, you know, not even like a small ball four, but just being like kind of a combo forward who can do a lot of different stuff. One of the most interesting trajectories to me in this college basketball season, because like he was like Mr. Pennsylvania basketball in 2014 and got like 0 offers despite it. It's amazing. Like I want to say I think he was like 6'4" when he graduated high school, and then grew like 5 more inches like in his next year.
Jeez. Yeah,
so like totally different in terms of being a late bloomer, but a guy to watch for sure. I think that it would not surprise me if he ended up being a, you know, late first, you know, like maybe like mid-second round pick, because he is productive and he does have a skill set that projects interestingly to the NBA. Vince Edwards, Keita Bates-Diop, Chandler Hutchison, any of those guys interesting?
I've seen Edwards probably the most. A little bit of a Swiss Army knife type, can do a lot of different things. Looks capable off the catch as a shooter. Maybe he sped up his release a little bit. I've watched him pretty selectively over the last couple of years. He looks more comfortable now over contests. Pretty good handler in big spaces as far as dribbling the ball. Decent passer on the move. Has a size and frame, but I'm not sure if he has the quickness defensively, and that start-stop athleticism I'm not sure is there. The first step looks pretty average to me. How much can he create? He looks kind of like a system 4. I don't know if that fits what you think, what you see. Yeah.
I'm not going to want to go too in depth on these guys just because I think they're worth mentioning, but like I think they're all probably second round picks. Vince Edwards' statistical profile is really interesting though. Last year, I want to say, let me pull up the number here. He averaged, I think, 12.9 points, I think 4.9 rebounds and 3.6 assists. And the only other people to put up those numbers were like Markelle Fultz, Dennis Smith, Josh Jackson, and like maybe like one other guy who went in the first round. So, and then like the year before, it was just like Denzel Valentine and Karis LeVert. So, like the first round, trajectory of guys who do what he's done in college is really strong, but I do think he's a little bit more of a system-y guy than those guys.
That's fair. Do you have any thoughts on Yves Pons and Isaac Bonga? Those are the 2 guys that we haven't gotten to yet.
I was going to bring up Pons. You know, Bonga to me is just fascinating because he's definitely just like a 6'9" point guard right now. He does need to just become so much stronger at this stage. Like he has not filled into his body enough at all yet. Like we've talked before on the podcast how when Giannis was coming up, he didn't have the same explosiveness that he does now. Bonga is even less athletic than what we saw of Giannis when Giannis entered the draft. Does have like a very fluid ability, but and can really pass the ball, can really handle the ball at his size. But he just needs to be so much more explosive to gain separation at this stage. You know, this summer he played in, what was it? Did he play in the U18 or the U19, the U18 Euros or the U19 World Championships? I can't remember. I think he played in the World Championships, despite being a year under. He just couldn't get any separation. Like he finished poorly at the rim the entire competition. And to me, he's a second round pick right now that if he continues to fill out his body and mature, would not be crazy for him to become a first round pick in the future, but he's not there yet. Yves Pons. I'll let you talk about Yves Pons because he's one of the more fascinating guys in the entirety of college basketball this year, because from what I know, he's just like this French kid who, never really lifted weights before like this year and is just the most shredded human being I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's a real person or not, but he's might be the best vertical athlete in the draft too. Like off 2 feet, he is ridiculously explosive. You have that frame that's already so established without the strength acquisition via lifting weights. It's just insane. Like the physical tools are there. I have to go back and watch that tape where he guarded Musa in the U17s to get a better idea of his on-ball defense. I've heard he just completely shut him down. So that's on my next to-do list as far as that goes. His shot doesn't look that great, but it doesn't look horrible at the same time. Like he shoots a set shot that has, I think, workable mechanics from a standstill. I don't think he's going to shoot off movement or anything off the dribble or anything like that. But if he can just shoot a spot three, he's so fast in straight lines. He can dribble well enough in big spaces, and he can definitely explode at the rim. That if he combines that with defense, you have one of those bigger framed, more athletic guys that can cover NBA threes. If he can play both sides of the ball, those guys are just really hard to get.
Yeah, he is a monster defender. He can legit switch like 1 through 4 and have absolutely zero issues from what I've seen. Like he is 6'6", 6'7", somewhere in that range. His length, I would say he's like probably 6'11" wingspan, something like that. Good length.
Okay.
Great feet. Like, and tenacious, you know what I mean? Like, he just really, really attacks at the point of attack whenever he's on the ball. No matter if it's a 1 or a 4, he can stay with them and have absolutely zero issues there. A playmaker too. Like he blocks a ton of shots. He gets into passing lanes. Really, really good player. I am fascinated by him at Tennessee this year. I think Tennessee is like maybe the most underrated team entering the college basketball season, but between like him, Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield, like a couple of the other guys they have. Not all these guys are like NBA players, but they have a lot of really, really good college players that I am thrilled to watch.
Right now, obviously a lot is contingent on how he performs this year, how much time he gets in the rotation. What are the odds do you think he comes out in this next draft? What would you set him at?
God, I couldn't even.
Yeah.
Like I can't predict that. You know what I mean? Like I don't know enough about the kid at this stage. I find him fascinating. And I think that he is going to be like one of the most like must-watch players in college basketball because he's going to throw down some vicious, vicious dunks. But like, I don't really have a feel for, what his trajectory looks like in terms of does he decide to, come out after 1 year? What does he play over 25 minutes a game? Because, again, Tennessee does have like a pretty experienced roster coming back. Grant Williams returns. I think that, like I said, like Schofield, I think like Jordan Bone and like Jordan Bowden and Shimbari Phillips, like all those guys were underclassmen last year. I don't think any of them transferred, but that might not be right. But like they just have a ton of guys that can fill out their rotation, and a lot of them are similar in terms of just being, those switchable type players. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think he's the most interesting international prospect in kind of that latter tier. I'm going to probably end up being too high on him at the first just to come out a little strong. I just see a lot of intrigue with this play. And if he can really defend as advertised, I believe in his shot enough from a stationary position where it's possible that he shoots NBA threes. And there's just, not a lot of guys like him in the league. Mm-hmm.
Shimbari Phillips did transfer. I'm sorry. I'm looking up what ended up happening with some of these guys. But, they do still have like Kyle Alexander, Grant Williams, Schofield, Jordan Bowden, Jordan Bone, Lamonte Turner, I think, is there as well. Like they have some guys that are going to be there. Plus they get in James Daniel, the kid from Howard, who, led the nation in scoring, I believe, as a sophomore. So a lot of fun at Tennessee this year. That's all we got for this podcast, though, Cole. Do you want to plug anything?
As usual, check out the Stepien and continue to tune into this podcast. We'll probably go over bigs next week. I'm not sure if you want to group them by 4s and 5s or just overall. But, that's basically where my draft contest is coming right now. So just stay tuned in here.
Go follow Cole at Cole Zwicker on Twitter, ColeZwicker. This has been Sam Vecini. Please subscribe to The Athletic. Please remember our sponsor, Greats. Use the promo code Game Theory to save 15% on shoes over at greats.com. That's about all I got right now. Wednesday, I have a really cool guest, a good friend of mine out here in LA who has a ton of experiences in a lot of different aspects of the basketball world. Beyond that, though, keep plugged to The Athletic. I will have my NBA mock draft coming out at some point this week, I think. Like I said, I filed, but I also filed like 6,000 words, so it's a pretty substantial edit. So we'll see what ends up happening there in terms of timing. But yeah, I'll be back on Wednesday, and until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.